We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're talking Joe Biden, democracy versus republic, Donald Trump at the Supreme Court, and a whole lot more. It's going to be quite the show. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Election year is upon us once more, 2024. How are the main contenders' campaigns going? What are the highs? What are the lows? And what are the hurdles to be expected? We're very fortunate to have joining us once again on Liberty Nation Radio, Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Mr. Graham J. Noble. Thanks for being here, Graham.
It's a pleasure, Mark.
So, Graham, we both watched the President Joe Biden's Valley Forge speech. I know what I thought of it, and I'm sure the great American public out there know what they think of it. But as Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, give us your take.
Well, Mark, it was an interesting speech. I mean, I will say, and perhaps this is the most complimentary thing I can say, is that of all of the speeches Joe Biden has given since he's been in the White House, this was possibly at least the most coherent in terms of you could understand what he was actually saying about 90% of the time. And he did clearly kind of wander off script once or twice, but it wasn't the kind of disaster that his speeches so often are. So I'll give him that much. But in terms of the content of the speech, it was, of course, the most notable thing about it, as I wrote for the pages of LibertyNation.com, was that this is probably the first time in living memory that an incumbent president gave a campaign speech that did not at all mention his record so far as president.
I mean, I can take a guess why. Let's be honest, right? The fact is, before he became president in 2020, the thing that he had going for him with the voting public was that he wasn't Donald Trump, and he was an unknown quantity. And he was, I'm not going to be Donald Trump. I'm going to govern differently. And there was nobody who could say, well, you can't criticize how he's governing, because yes, he's been in Washington, D.C. longer than there's been a Washington, D.C., basically. Not really, but he's been vice president. He's been a senator, but we've never seen him as president, so we don't know how he'd govern. And now, 3 years down the line, everybody can see very, very well how he's governed, and therefore he refuses to talk about how he's governed during it's the first campaign speech of 2024. That should be an important note, shouldn't it, Graham? That should be setting the tone for the whole year, shouldn't it?
You would think so. You would think his opening speech would have been like, this is what I've done. This is what we've achieved. This is how great things are. It's interesting, Mark, because I thought back to the single presidential campaign between then President Jimmy Carter and the Republican challenger, Ronald Reagan. And of course, Reagan famously asked the question during the debate, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Well, okay, so Joe Biden couldn't use that exact line because he's so far, we're 3 years into his presidency. But even then, he wouldn't have been able to ask the question, are you better off? I suspect if he'd tried to play on that question at all, he would have changed it around and he would have just simply said, you are better off than you were 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's very much...
You may not believe it because the media is not telling you the truth, but trust me, you are better off.
Yeah, it comes to something when a Democrat supporting media, a Democrat supporting fourth estate, has to be told off by the administration that you're not doing enough to get our message out there. And the reality is they are. If that is their chief goal, the media's chief goal is to bolster Joe Biden, they're doing it. And a big round of applause to them for doing it the very best that they can with the tools that's been provided. Now, let's talk a little bit about this this speech again. So well, I want to get into the content of it, but let's talk the setting first. And there's something that I have to get off my chest about this. So it was at Valley Forge. Now, I'm sure everybody knows that this was the overwintering place for George Washington and all the
Well,
soldiers.
everybody except people who are currently in college and school, they probably don't
Yeah,
know, but
maybe they
everyone
don't
else
know.
knows.
So this was, and it's become a symbol, very, very much so, of how the valiant defenders of freedom, they've put themselves into this freezing, bitter, cold winter. This isn't Florida in winter. This isn't
No.
Florida. This is Valley Forge. This is cold, and it really tells you something about their resolve to deal with such unnaturally cold, frigid weather and hardship. And now, here's the thing, right? Joe Biden was supposed to speak on January the 6th, the anniversary of January 6th, but they moved it a day forward. Why?
Because it was going to be too cold on
It was
January.
going to be too cold. The
The
weather
weather,
was going to be bad, so they
yes.
decided not to go to Valley Forge. For me, Graham, that is everything that speech represented. I couldn't get over that. And the fact that nobody's mentioning that,
Mm.
it just blows my mind. Anyway, talk to me
Yeah.
about the content of the
Yeah,
Valley
yeah.
Forge
No, that's actually some
speech.
great insight, Mark, and I will cop to the fact that that thought itself did not occur to me when I was writing the article about
Oh,
it.
see, the
But,
original, not
but
just a
that
pretty face in here.
but that is a great point, actually. Yes, very very apropos. Yeah, well, the speech itself was so we've already said that he didn't mention his record at
Mm,
all, and instead he spoke about. It was very much a kind of a fear-mongering
mm,
speech where he was warning about, democracy being on the line and we would lose our democracy. But here's the thing: he very much focused, of course, on Trump, and he said a number of things in that speech about Trump that just simply are not true.
mm,
It's not a matter of opinion; it's a matter of if you look at the facts, if you compare what he said about Trump, and then look at the what really happened, those things are simply not true. A number of falsehoods, let's say, he put forwards, like on January 6th, 2021, everyone was pleading with Trump to, go on television and tell his supporters to, kind of leave peacefully and wrap it up. And he actually did so. He did go on television and say that, but Joe Biden, kind of insisted that Trump refused to do that. Um, and one of the remarkable things that got me was that he actually accused Trump of, and he's not the only person who's done this. I've seen this in a couple of other media outlets. They reported on a post that Trump put up on the Truth Social network, and this was in I believe in 2022. Trump posted on the Truth Social network. What he posted was a warning. He basically went back to the results of the 2020 election, which he still insists, as many of his supporters still insist, that was a fraudulent election result. And he went back to that and he said, if this fraud is allowed to stand, then potentially that allows for the termination of all rules and regulations and articles, including those in the Constitution. So he was warning that that could happen. But Joe Biden actually twisted his words completely around and presented it as him, Trump,
yeah.
saying that he intended to terminate the Constitution, which was, just a dreadful, misrepresentation of the truth.
It's funny that the more somebody gets misrepresented by having their words twisted, it's because people fear the truth that they might be saying. And so that gives you an idea of where the trajectory is heading. We'll be back with Graham Noble after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril. Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.